Hello, you 214 lovable scoundrels. My name is Steve Kalis, and welcome to the Steve Kalis Show. 214, by the way, being the number of you that have clicked follow here on Spotify. That really means the world to us. We're doing so well at the minute. We're up to, at time of recording, 69 reviews on Spotify, with an average rating of 4.9 out of 5, which is really impressive, and I haven't stopped going on about it. I'm really excited about it. This episode is a strange one, and I want to explain it for a minute if you'll have me. I have sat on this episode for maybe a couple of months because I wasn't sure whether or not to ever release it. Now, the guy that we speak to, the guest on this show, this episode, is a guy called Mark. Mark has a very, very strange, quite dark, very interesting alien/UFO story to tell us. He'd been reluctant to talk about it in the past to other people, but he agreed to talk to us about it and tell this story to us because he'd been talking about it a little bit on Reddit and on online forums, that sort of thing. So the episode is trimmed down from it's a couple of hours we recorded for, so I've trimmed it right down. The important thing you need to know is that this man had a very, very distinguished military career, and he touches on it for the first sort of 10 minutes or so. This isn't just some average Joe. This is a trained observer who wants to talk about this strange experience that happened to him. Now, that doesn't mean I believe what he's saying or anything like that. If you're a regular listener to the show, you would know that we interviewed a man recently who said that he ate dog food to lose weight, and it turned out to not be true, so we deleted that episode. It turned out he was just trying to get on a podcast and tell this crazy story. So we're much more strict about what stories we let sort of onto the show. But this story is so good, and he tells it so well, and it's so creepy that I think you, the listener, will really, really enjoy it. If you do find yourself enjoying this episode, or you want to stick around for the journey, then please consider clicking subscribe or follow, leaving us a review. That's really important wherever you're listening to this. And I hope you're okay. Are you okay? You listening to this? What are you doing? Are you on the toilet? Are you driving? I want to know. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode, and reach out on social media and let me know what you think, because I really, really would love to get your opinions on it, because it is a very strange story, and I would love some feedback. So without any further ado, here is the enigmatic Mark. Hello and welcome to the Steve Kalis Show. We've got another special episode today, and I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to jump straight in. I'm joined by Mark. Mark, how are you? How are you doing?
Like I said earlier, living the dream and glad to be here. I had mentioned it in the past that I'd been previously invited on a couple of podcasts, and I'd turned them down until now. I checked you guys out. You seemed interesting. I liked your show. I liked that you are, as of yet, not terribly big. Hopefully that'll change.
We're working on it. We're working on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and like I said to you just off air, your voice is like honey in my ear. So it's a cracking start we've got off to so far. Let's jump straight in, and because the stuff we're talking about today is extraordinary, and I think building a small world of context around it is really important. So let's talk about your military career as much as you can. How much can you tell us, and what is it that you did?
Sure. So, I can tell you a fairly decent amount. What I always tell people is that there are, and actually I stole this saying from someone else myself, but there are secret operations, there are secret tasks, right? But there are no secret operators. So anyone that tells you that, oh, what I did was classified, they won't even tell you what they did. Probably not telling the truth. I mean, unless you've met the 1 in a billion person that is truly some sort of like John Wick, that's just simply not going to happen either. Your chances of meeting someone like that are pretty slim. But anyway, sorry, get off topic here. Um, so I joined the Air Force out of United States Air Force out of high school, and I had always wanted to have some sort of special operations job. Originally, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. Uh, wanted to do that for quite a number of years. And as I grew a bit older and I started finding out about other special operations units, started realizing that each unit sort of had its own speciality, its own tasking within the greater military. Um, that sort of started deciding for me what I wanted to do. Interestingly enough, I'd always been interested in meteorology and weather. And believe it or not, there is a special operations career field within the U.S. Air Force that is at least partially focused around weather meteorology, and that is called the Special Operations Weather Team, SOWT, SOWT. When referring to an individual on the team, they are a SOWT, but with the entire SOWT is also the SOWT. So it can stand for either Special Operations Weather Team or Special Operations Weather Technician. But we just call everyone SOWTs. We rarely use the term Special Operations Weather Team. It's always technician. So obviously that's a bit odd when I explain it to people. You can't just tell someone right off the bat you were a special operations weather technician, because people just laugh at you.
Yeah, what does that entail exactly? Well, I mean, obviously as much as you
Right,
can. What is the job?
right. So the if I have to boil it down, and I'll go into details a bit, but just to give you a general overview, I would say that the best way to describe the job is that we collect and analyze meteorological and environmental information from areas where we might otherwise have none. So these are generally denied areas, quote unquote, behind enemy lines, right? Obviously, in modern warfare, lines aren't truly a thing, but I think most people get my drift. It's easy to say, well, why can't a drone do that? Why can't a satellite do that? And my response to that is, well, the human factor is always going to be important, right? First off, there are things that drones and satellites cannot do. Can a drone go and measure the depth of mud next to a river to make sure it would support, vehicular crossings? Can a drone actually make forecasts? No, of course not. So there's that, but there's also the element of, we are, not to sound offensive, we are also fully trained special operators. So you're introducing special operators into an environment, behind enemy lines, like I said, where what else can they do? Well, we're already there. We can conduct direct action raids. We can conduct reconnaissance. We can conduct whatever tasks you can imagine that that men such as myself could do while we are there. We're going to do, obviously, as long as it's relatively safe for us to do, and even sometimes when it's not, obviously. So it's a fairly small career field. I say small, it's fairly small. It's extremely small. It is the smallest special operations unit within the U.S. military. No one's ever heard of us. And generally, that's the way we like it. Um, we have about a 2 year long training pipeline. So from the moment you graduate boot camp and you become a United States Airman, um, you start what we call the pipeline. And the pipeline is, like I said, about 2 years long. And it is definitely the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life. Just to put this in comparison, to become a Navy SEAL probably takes like 8 months to slightly over a year. That's not to say that that our pipeline is more difficult. I wouldn't say it's easier. I wouldn't say it's more difficult. I'd say it's just a challenging in a different way. Uh, it's quite a bit longer. Most folks in the special operations community um, that are aware of us, I mean, even within the special operations community, you will meet people who are like, "What? Who? I'm sorry, who are you? Like, what? What are you again?" Um, and it didn't help that I was very young either, and I've always had a baby face, and so even when I graduated the pipeline, and I was 20, uh, 21, I still looked like I was like 16, 17, and people just straight up would be like, "I don't believe you. You're just some kid who just graduated boot camp." Um, but anyways, very long school, and it's not just one school. The pipeline is consists of rather probably 5 or 6 schools, um, at least. Um, the longest of which is what we sort of just refer to as weather school. Weather school is about 8 months long. And the way I like to describe it to people is if you took a more or less a college, a 4 year college meteorology course, um, and condensed it into 8 months.
Is that enough context for people to understand that you are not some? I mean, what's a polite way to say it? You're not some rando dude off the street who
No,
has had an experience and
yeah,
has no way to gauge
right.
what that experience might mean. You are literally a trained observer of
I, I,
certain phenomena.
I'm quite literally. I don't know how much more literally you could get. I have an
You are,
FAA.
yeah.
I have an FAA weather observer certification. I beyond the reconnaissance role. I, you know, I, uh, but including the reconnaissance role, I've been through many scout recon courses. So yeah, no, obviously I am. I've learned how to identify, aircraft, allied aircraft, U.S. aircraft, enemy aircraft. I know all that stuff. And
And that's important, and I really want people to understand that and all of these things about you. So, and that's what makes the story that you're about to tell us stand out. So, I mean, if you're happy and comfortable, we can begin to wade straight into when things become unusual. What happened?
sure. So I got out of the military. I got out mostly for medical reasons. Um, don't want to go too much into that, but more or less, you know, I was given a choice, and I could, get out honorably, or I could I could stay in and risk sort of getting pushed into a job that I didn't want to do. So I chose to get out. Um, I had always wanted to be a police officer, law enforcement officer, and um, so fairly shortly after getting out, I became a Leo law enforcement officer. Um, and yeah, I love that job. I love doing it. Um, I don't necessarily like a lot of the people I work with. Unfortunately, it is a career field that attracts sort of power hungry individuals, and people that were bullied, people that were bullies.
Oh, let me
which is
say, I can
interesting.
totally, I can, in a weird way, I can relate because my main profession, outside of this podcast, is I work in security, and
Oh,
security
you
is
deal with them
just
all the time.
a,
Yeah.
oh man, ego is a real. You can't. I recoil from so many other security officers because they'll sidle over to you, and the first thing they'll say is, "Oh, you should see this bloke that I smacked yesterday." Yeah, and you just think, "Oh, Jesus Christ!" So I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, just very little humility across the
Mm.
board, and they think things that are cool that make them look just like absolute douchebags, and just, I don't know how else to put it, but
Mm.
anyways, same thing with law enforcement. You know, it's exact same thing, if not worse. Because
Hmm.
I'd imagine in the security field, you do have a large percentage of people where it's just a job and they're just trying to get by and whatever. um
That's it.
whereas whereas in law enforcement, a far larger percentage of these people are looking at this as a career, and you're like, oh, no, like these people are going to be here for like 20 or 30 years doing this. um and sometimes they'll say things to you, and it's like, if that's what you'll say to me, what are you saying to people on the street?
For
uh
sure.
when the camera's off, like, holy cow. But anyways, um, so despite that, it's still a job that I like. If I sort of block that stuff out, I like the impact that I can have personally with people, and I like meeting new people, and I like all that. And so, uh, very long story short, for those who haven't guessed what's coming, I began experiencing a series of very odd events a few years ago. Um, I, I would say it started with something which occurred while I was on duty. I don't know if this is in any way related to. I don't know if any of these things I'm about to relay are actually related. Um, I just I get the impression, I get the feeling, that they're related. I sense that the timing is not coincidental. Everything happened within a short time span. Um, that's weird for multiple reasons, and you'll see when once I'm through explaining all these events. So, the the first event, I was on duty. I receive a call for service regarding uh, the dispatcher was trying to explain it, but they were having a hard time. They basically said they thought uh, this young woman was calling in, saying that someone was trying to break into their home, their apartment, and it's a pretty big deal. So it's a small town I work in, but it's a college town. So there's a lot of of young people renting apartments here. Um, and I figured it was just some silly either prank or whatever, and or some boyfriend outside yelling at his ex or something, some stupid thing like that. And so I get there, and these two young women frantically open the door as I'm coming up and are like hissing at me to come inside and look like they've been crying, and I'm like, this is weird. This is either the start to something good or very bad. This is really weird. and so I go in, and they're like, did you see it? Did you see it? And I was like, no. And they were like, there's something trying to get into the house. And I'm like, right. So, like a person? And they're like, no, something. And I was like, right. So, like a person? And they're like, no, no, no. Like, I don't know what it is, but like it keeps looking in the windows. And I was like, yeah, okay. Um, so let's just chill here for a little bit, and I'll get your information and do what I have to do. And I'm gonna. Which did it come to a certain window? Yes, that one. Okay, so I'm gonna stand here. I'm gonna face that window. I'm gonna watch the window, and while I get this information from you. So I stood there. Of course, nothing happens. And I stayed with them for like a solid 20 minutes and nothing happened. And they're like, well, yeah, the noise is gone too. And after 20 minutes, I'm like, no noise. What? No, you don't, you didn't think to tell me about this. What is the noise? And they're like, it was this like screeching sound. Screeching sound. Yeah, it was like a train whistle. And the other girl goes, no, like a no, I guess it was kind of like a train whistle, but it sounded like an animal. And I'm going in through my head, what animal could be making this noise? Um, I grew up in the country, hunting, all that, so I'm familiar with animal calls, sounds, and nothing is coming to mind. So I'm like, look, I've been here 20 minutes. I can take a few drives by. The rest of the night, I work the night shift, um, and I'll give you my number, and uh, if you need me, just give me a call. So I opened the front door, and instantly that sound started. And it was, I can see why the women had trouble describing it. It was unlike anything I've ever heard. It was a cross between like some sort of mechanical and biological like whistle or cry, and it would go up and then fade and then go up and then fade, and it was fairly rhythmic. And I was like, what the fuck is that? And they just freaked the fuck out and slammed the door, and I'm left outside. I'm like, gee, thanks. And so I go around the side of the house, and I start going to the tree line. And this house was sort of at the end of a row of apartments, and it goes through a tree line, which is the beginning of pretty deep woods. And I go up to the woods, and I start getting this incredibly strong feeling of dread and anxiety, to the point where I notice my hands are shaking. Um, I do not experience anxiety. Um, I, that's sort of something that is trained out of you. Adrenaline control, stress control, fear management, all of that is pounded out of you pretty well um, when you become an operator. And um, so it served me well in law enforcement. But this time it was almost like something was turning on a switch in my brain, and I couldn't stand it. And I backed away, and it was like I crossed an invisible line, and that switch turned off. And I felt fine. I was still a bit weirded out, but those feelings of dread and anxiety instantly vanished. So I'm like, what the fuck? And the only thing that occurs to me is that I know certain predators can create what's called infrasound. I don't know if you've ever heard of infrasound. Um,
No, no.
should look it up. It's quite interesting phenomenon. It's essentially a type of sound that can trigger anxiety. They put it into horror movies to trigger anxiety.
Wow, cool.
It's latent, yeah. And apparently, things like mountain lions, they think maybe grizzly bears, I believe, can produce this sound to stun smaller prey and disorient larger prey. And there are supposedly mountain lions in our area. And I was like, I've never heard of mountain lions. Maybe that's what a mountain lion sounds like when it's injured. I don't know. So I go back to my cruiser. I call for an environmental police officer to come out, basically a state game warden, if you want to call him that, because I'm like, I don't know what this is. Game warden comes out. He's like, did you go in the woods? And I was like, no, you go in there. I don't know, my fucking job.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, why don't why don't you come with me? And I was like, yeah, all right, all right. And I go back to my cruiser, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Getting my rifle." And he's like, "Yeah, it's probably a good idea." And so I get my long gun, and I go with him. We go in the woods. We cross this invisible line right before the tree line. I see him visibly start sweating within like 20 seconds of crossing that line. So he is visibly sweating, and it's like 40 degrees, if not cooler than that. And 40 degrees Fahrenheit, obviously. And so we get in the woods. We get probably 10, 15 steps in, and that feeling is just growing stronger and stronger, and that noise is getting louder and louder and louder, and it feels like it's all around us. And I'm just like, this is fucking bullshit. We need to leave. And I hear like a twig crack above me, and I immediately pan my long gun up. And in the back of my head, I was like, I know it's going to be like a fucking squirrel, but or a chipmunk, you know. But I pan my long gun up, and he lifts his flashlight up as well. I had a flashlight on my long gun, and very bright, lights up huge swath, and we see the branches moving like something is walking or running across like from branch to branch, tree to tree. And there's nothing there. There's absolutely nothing there. But there was something going from tree to tree, heavy enough to like bend the branches. And we just look at each other and we're like, let's get the fuck out of here. I don't know what that was, and I don't claim to know. I don't claim that it was anything paranormal or supernatural, but I certainly do not have a natural explanation for it. There was nothing there, and interestingly, many years after the fact, not many years, a few years after the fact, a couple years after the fact, when I started getting into this sort of thing, especially due to the events that happened to me after this tree incident, I started getting into UFOs and paranormal activity and whatever else. I discovered that other people had experienced something like this. And what they usually reported was, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but what they usually report is something like a predator like as in the movie Predator.
That's what sprung to mind when you
The
mentioned it.
wavy, yeah, they see this sort of like wavy being, and I did not see that. I don't know if it was because of nighttime, whatever, uh, or maybe he just wasn't there. I don't know if
No, but
those stories.
almost. I suppose if we allow ourselves the sort of playground to conjecture in, I suppose you could say daytime maybe it would come across a little bit wavier because there's light refracting off of it. I suppose.
Quite possibly, but we
Yeah.
also had mag lights, two mag lights trained on it, and those
Oh, I
things are
see.
bright,
Right, right,
bright.
right,
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about you look at one for more than a second, and you're gonna have at least temporary blindness.
right.
Um,
Gotcha.
so, anyways, so we ran out of the forest, and of course we walked calmly. Rather, we definitely didn't run.
Sure,
Uh,
sure.
and we actually smoked cigars on the way out and put our
Laughing about the
sunglasses
whole
on.
thing. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Had a grand old time, and so we get out of the woods. We cross that. We. What's interesting is that I notice that that invisible line that I had mentioned earlier was had moved further into the woods. So it was like the line moved with whatever this thing was, right? Because I noticed I crossed it far earlier than I had crossed it previously. I was still in the woods this time, leaving when I crossed it, and I was running, and like that. The anxiety, the dread went away, and I'm like, "What the fuck was that?" Like it was just silliness. I was like, "We just saw something jumping in the trees," and more or less the same thing happened to the other gentleman, although I could tell he was far more perturbed than I was. And he immediately says, "Well, that was a fat fucking squirrel, huh?" And I was like, that wasn't a yeah, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, squirrel, yep, okay.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm just like, well, I don't know what that was, man, but that wasn't a fucking squirrel. And he was like, no, you didn't see the squirrel? And I was like, there was no fuck. Yeah, okay, all right. What was it, an 80-pound squirrel? Um, because I mean, again, these branches were were bowing like there was a person on them. That's the best weight equivalent I can give. A squirrel can jump on a branch all and it doesn't matter at all. And but anyways, so a few weeks later, um, I get off duty and I go over to my mom's house to pick up my dog. We have a habit of walking our dogs together, and we go outside. It's like 11 o'clock at night. I hadn't of that incident with the trees. I really didn't. It was just a weird thing. I figured there was some sort of explanation that I wasn't thinking of. I just moved on and out of my mind after a day or two. And so we take our dogs out this night. Again, it was like maybe 2 weeks later, probably not even. And we are standing outside in her front yard. And I believe I was actually on my phone, which is interesting for a couple of reasons. And she is always pointing out interesting stars and aircraft doing odd things, whatever. And so she says, "Mark, what is that?" And I didn't even look up. I said, "It's just a plane. I don't know, whatever." And I was texting a girl or something, I don't know. And she physically grabs me and goes, "What is that?" And like I could just immediately tell by the tone of her voice. And she physically turns me and coming directly toward us uh, is a massive, and I mean massive, uh, black triangle. And it is at point of first sighting, it's probably about 1,500 to 2,000 feet. Um, I'd say at least 500 meters. Um, and distance, and it's probably only at most it was like 50 to 75 meters AGL above ground level, so off the ground. So it was fairly low to the ground. It was coming over a tree line, and it looked like it was only maybe 50 feet above the tree line. There were three lights on it, one on each of the 3 points of the triangle. Um, I was never good with this in school, so I want to describe it as as a as a so the front point looked to be about 90 degrees, and then the two rear points were less than 90 degrees, right? Would that make sense as far as the triangle goes?
Sure, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. So anyways, not that it needs to conform to any sort of particular shape, but that's just the way it looked regardless. So it was a bit wider than it was long. If indeed the point that was we're assuming that the point that was coming at us is the front because that's just the way the human mind works, right? Um, I don't know, but anyways, um, the moment that both of our eyes were on it, it froze, and I mean froze. I mean instantaneously stopped. There was no deceleration. It stopped. Which is insane. You're going 15 miles an hour, and that's actually probably about how fast it was going. It was going pretty slow. Um, if you're going 15 miles an hour and you instantaneously stop, you, the person, are still going to be going 15 miles an hour. Um, so obviously, these things, whatever they are, have some way of counteracting that, because you do that at any speed greater than like 15 miles an hour and you're gonna die. Or a human would, but anyways. So it instantaneously stops. We are both just standing there in absolute awe of this thing and just blown away. And I know I'm witnessing something that I'm probably, hopefully, never again going to see in the rest of my life. I say hopefully, I'd actually love to see it again, but uh, it's just beyond incredible, and it's almost when you're, it's almost like witnessing like a miracle or a or something along those lines. And I had never been interested in this sort of thing. It wasn't something that I'd pined for all my life, but the moment I saw it, I knew what I was witnessing was important, or was at least going to be important in my life. Um,
I'm envious
and
of people who get to experience something like this in a weird way. I know some people struggle with it, or it can be a sort of dark experience. But I think if I was to see a UFO and have no doubt in my mind that UFO or UAP and see it, and I knew exactly that's what it was, I would be over the moon, because part of me would be going, "Oh man, I love philosophizing about the nature of the universe and what our place in it might be. I love thinking about alien civilizations and what that might mean." And so I would know, oh man, okay, we're not alone in the universe. What does that mean? Where are they from? You know what I mean? And it would be exciting in a way. Did you feel like that, or did you feel? I mean, do you feel like that now, looking back at it?
oh, right, yeah, no, certainly not in the moment. In the moment,
Mm.
I was just
Yeah,
blown away.
sure. Hey, would you look at that?
Yeah,
Yeah, that must be a crazy
yeah.
civilization from here. Sure.
Well, so and after the fact, it actually, in some ways, you begin to wish that you had not seen it. Number one, because of the things that happened afterwards, and I had some sort of dark, if not mildly creepy at the very least, incidents. And secondly, because it doesn't answer anything. It's only the cause for more questions. And and what I mean by that is, you, you say you can matter of factly sort of look at it and say, look, there's proof of aliens. So I can't do that. I'm not saying that you're explicitly saying that it was aliens, but I can't look at that and say aliens. History guy meme. Uh, I can only I can only look at that and say that is a physical object that I'm witnessing. I don't put it beyond the realm of possibility that that is some sort of human technology.
Sure.
Um, I don't put it beyond the realm possibility that it's some sort of human technology that was reverse engineered from Roswell. I don't know. It could be literally anything. Um, it, it could be time travelers, could be dimensional travelers, anything. So once you realize that, it opens up far more doors than it
I see.
does give you keys, or it
Yeah,
presents
sure.
far more doors than it does give you keys. And but anyways, the actual sighting. So we're standing there, and it freezes and it remains frozen for only, perhaps a few seconds to 10 seconds maximum. Bear in mind, I had my phone in my hand. It would be very easy for me to lie and just, I didn't have my phone. I was walking my dog. Why would I take my phone? It'd be very easy for me to say that. My mother had her phone. I'm 90% sure. She's 90% sure. Why didn't I take a picture? Why didn't I take a video? If I had taken a video, even though it was at nighttime, it was so black, and the sky was so bright because of the moon, the stars. Live in a very pollution-free area, so one of those nights where you can look up and basically see like the Milky Way. It was so jet black that you could vividly make it out from the background of the sky. If I had taken a picture or a video, it would be like the greatest UFO picture or video of all time. Caveat to that, so would anyone else. All these UFO experiences, if anyone else had been able to take a picture or video, it would be one of the best videos. Why is that? Why don't we see that? That is a question that skeptics bring up all the time. Why don't we see pictures and videos? And for me, I can tell you that I believe there is some sort of physio-psychological effect on you. These these craft, whatever they are, have some form of physio-psychological effect on one. I was not literally frozen, but I didn't even think of taking a picture or a video. I was so overwhelmed in the moment that it wasn't even a consideration, wasn't even something that I deemed was possible. I didn't even, if you had asked me what a phone was, I probably wouldn't even have answered it in that moment. Now, I can easily tell you that it was because of sort of shock in seeing this object, and it may very well have been absolutely 100%. But I think it was deeper than that because we both experienced it. And to add to that, so the craft, after maybe 5 to 10 seconds of remaining stationary, it turned on its center axis. So at this point, it is maybe only 400 feet from us, 100 meters. It's about roughly the same altitude as it always had been. And it turned on its center axis. So it remained horizontal, if I'm saying that correctly. It remained, on the same plane. It remained horizontal, but it turned so its front point was essentially facing the quickest way of getting out of our sight line. And it immediately accelerated to a slightly faster speed than it was traveling when we first witnessed it. At least I think it was slightly faster this time. So maybe, 30, 40 miles an hour as opposed to 15 when we first saw it. And it was gone, and that was it. And we both, like what everyone would do, didn't speak about it, didn't acknowledge it. And I have no memory of the rest of that night. And I got up the next morning, like, what the fuck was that? And I called my mom and I'm like, how did we not talk about this? What? This is like one of the craziest things. What are you talking to? What the fuck? And she's just like, I don't know. I don't know what to say. And she reveals to me over like an hour-long conversation that she believes, and this is all she'll say to this day, she believes that when she was younger, she was visited. That's all she'll say. She will not go into detail.
Wow.
She won't. she won't expound upon it. She just says she can't help but think it's somehow related to that, and
Mm.
that's all she'll say. So that thoroughly creeped me out. So
Yeah.
now the following events, perfectly willing to admit that the following events could have just been me sort of overreacting, overthinking, and plus with my mom saying, that she had been visited and this UFO sighting, and that's getting to me, and and I'm starting to read about UFOs and sightings and missing memory, and so I fully admit that, you know it's quite possible that I overthought some of these things. But the next thing that happens, pretty straightforward. Uh, I'm asleep alone. Yeah, I was alone, um, in my house condo, um, and I wake up middle of the night, and I immediately go, there's someone in my house. Nothing, no sounds, nothing, nothing trigger that. Uh, but I immediately said, "There's someone in my house," and then I'm immediately like, "Oh, come on, there's no one in the house. I'm just being weird." So I close my eyes, and then sort of this thing in the back of my head from my time in the military was always, always, always trust your gut. And my eyes snap open, and I'm like, "Yeah, okay, God damn it, all right." So I bet, I'll just be safe and clear the house. So I get my weapon out of my nightstand, and I clear the upstairs. The upstairs is pretty small, very quickly, and I hear something downstairs, and I stop at the top of the stairs, and I announce myself as a police officer and that I'm armed, and if someone's in the house, just go out the way you came, and that'll be the end of it. And I'll give you 30 seconds. So I give them 30 seconds, and then I give them an extra 20 seconds because obviously you don't want to come downstairs right when they're expecting you to come downstairs. It would be kind of dumb. So I go down. Of course, there's no one. And I clear the downstairs. I clear the basement. I clear the cabinets. I clear the fridge. I look in every nook and cranny. And then I'm like, wait a minute, you dingbat. You have a security system. No one's going to be idiot. And I go over to my security system, and the panel says it was like reset alarm trip. It's some error, and it had been tripped. And but it looks like it was an error, but it's also telling me it had been tripped. So I'm like, well, that's weird. And then I look to my left, and my front door is open, ajar, slightly. I hadn't even noticed it. And yeah, and it's unlocked. Let me tell you, I never, ever would leave that unlocked. Never mind. Ajar. Ajar, that's insane. And guess what? I wouldn't have been able to set my security system had that door been ajar. So it's just not possible. Now, skeptic in me says, what, the alien needs to use a door. It needs to unlock a door. Like, they can travel millions of light years, but they need to go through the front door. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Absolutely. But then why are all these things happening in sequence to me? It's just bizarre. And so then we get to the final event, which is weird. it's really weird. And I understand some people are going to laugh the moment they hear what I say. This is the penultimate act, and it's so silly. I get up one morning, just normal morning, nothing weird about it. And um I go downstairs and I open my refrigerator. Now this was probably only like a week after the quote unquote break-in incident, and that break-in quote unquote was only, like I had said, what, like a week or two after the UFO sighting, and the UFO sighting was only like a week or two after that sort of mysterious tree episode. So everything's happening like within a week's time frame, roughly. So I go downstairs, I open my refrigerator, and dead center in my refrigerator, on like this top shelf, I think it was, yeah, is sitting this carton of juice that I had never seen before in my life. It's not the it's not the strangest thing in the world, except I had never even seen this brand before. It was just a totally unfamiliar juice. It was a flavor that I would never even think of buying. It was something weird. It was like mango coconut, or something kind of not very appealing sounding to me, at least. So I wouldn't even buy that. And it was just sitting there very, almost prominently. And I am mystified by this juice, but I don't think much of it. But then throughout the day, I'm thinking more and more about it. I'm like, what the fuck? The only other person that had a key to my house was my best friend. And I happened to ask him if he had been in. He was like, dude, I'm in California visiting family now. Oh yeah, yeah, you are, yeah. So it wasn't him. And I start doing some research into this brand of juice. And first of all, it's not available anywhere in my area. It's not available north of the Mason-Dixon line. You got to be in the southern United States to get it. I think the absolute closest place was like southern Pennsylvania. I found a store that sold it. And it wasn't just using like an online store finder. I called like every fucking supermarket within like a 800-mile radius over the course of a few weeks and inquired about this juice. And it's funny, every single store like north of the Mason-Dixon was like, what is this? What brand? What? And no idea. And then anyone south is like, oh yeah, 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 we sell that. Yep. Instantly knew what it was. And it's like a fairly popular juice brand in the South, and it's bottled in Florida. I'm not saying there's anything weird about the juice itself, just how the hell did it get in my fridge? Um, and that was it. That was it. Nothing strange ever happened to me after that.
Oh, I wouldn't be able to live with that. I couldn't. How that that would drive me fucking insane. Do you remember? That reminds me of there's a meme that says a fairly cheap way to live in someone's head rent free is to randomly leave watermelons on their front doorstep and never say anything about it. It's like that. It's just that's so stressful. Where the fuck did that juice come from?
Uh, yeah, and you know what? When people, because I've told a few people this story by now, um, and most people are like, don't you want to know? Don't you want to try to find out more? I've spoken with one paranormal investigator, um, and he was trying to convince me to do hypnosis. And at
Oh, well,
first, I did.
in case it was a less cognizant or not unconscious you.
He believes that I've been abducted, and he believes that the juice was. This is hilarious. What he thinks the juice was. He thinks the he thinks the aliens or whomever dropped me off in the wrong place, and I was so parched and so whatever. Uh, which is actually a fairly common side effect of abductees report after their abductions. They say they're quite parched. But
Sure.
anyways, whatever. He says I, must have wandered into a store and picked up this juice and just, bought it, drank it, whatever. And I was like, what, did I have my wallet, my pajamas, in my boxers?
But you noticing
You know,
any
and he,
time was missing? Like, were you skipping time, or was time going?
again, nothing really that was prominent, but he's saying, this guy was telling me, things could happen at night. I was dreaming a lot about the UFO sighting, and it had a very ominous undertone to it, sort of just
Mm.
this very deep, ominous undertone. Maybe not that it was inherently bad, but that it was just sort of a bit creepy, and he took everything as a sign that I was an abductee, and he wanted to get me hypnotized very badly, and I refuse. I don't,
Is
believe it or
it
not.
because you don't believe it, or because you don't want to tap
I don't
that
want to know.
vein?
I don't want
Yeah,
to know.
sure.
I
Yeah.
Because the human brain is capable of creating these scenarios. I have no doubt about it. I don't
Yeah.
know if I believe or disbelieve abductees, but I do believe that the human brain is capable of creating fantastic scenarios. And I don't know what my brain's going to tell me. And
Yeah, but
and
you were
what if I come out
burdened
with
with.
this?
Yeah, I totally understand. But you were burdened with
Yeah,
a physical juice as some kind of clue, as some kind of something. You know what I mean?
hmm
It's not like oh, there's a chance I could have been sleepwalking because the fridge was open, the door was open, the alarm was
Well,
unset. Da, 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 da. You know what I mean?
and that's the other thing. That is the other thing, is that I did sleepwalk when I was a child.
Yeah.
Um, I know a lot of kids do. As far as I know, I grew out of it. I never did it while I was in the military. When people were sort of sleeping in the same room, so they could tell you if you did. So I'm quite positive I had grown out of that. But
And you think
that's a
that would have been the
possibility.
time with
What did
heightened
I?
stress. You know what I mean? You do think that.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, but
Yeah.
as far as sleepwalking go, did I sleepwalk 800 miles to the grocery
Right, that's
store?
it. Yeah,
And
yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Yeah.
you know, and someone once suggested, well, did you have anyone over? I said no, like the night before. You said, you sure you might have forgotten? I said, all right, well, let's say I forgot. I went into my fridge before going to bed that night. I specifically remember because I was getting out my dog's food, because I
Mm.
keep it refrigerated. It's fresh food, and I put the food out, and that juice wasn't there. I would have noticed it. So
So
sure,
now, how do you look back on this experience? Like, how do you reflect on it? How does it affect you day to day, or
yeah,
does it even? Do you
yeah.
think about it still? And
Um, I I'd have to say it was a in hindsight, it's a neutral to moderately positive events. It definitely, uh, I sort of consider myself, after leaving the military. I was a bit of a, I thought I was very worldly, and I was very mature for my age and done a lot of things, gone a lot of places, but it turns out I wasn't really very introspective, and I wasn't looking very deep into any of those things, and everything was just a bit surface level. And these events, on the positive side, these events sort of allowed me to expand my mind a little bit, and delve into things that I sort of considered at least a bit silly, um,
yeah,
and allowed me to, investigate things that I wouldn't normally. And there is almost an element of silliness, of the fantastical, to a lot of these paranormal events, and
mm.
one has to wonder if there is perhaps, maybe, a sense of humor behind it, or if not a sense of humor, at least a sense of, a bit of a sense of whimsy, or who knows, that could be utterly ridiculous, but I mean, I don't
Well, I
know.
mean, you could. I've always think about the old saying: if lions could talk, or if animals could talk, we still wouldn't understand them. Meaning, their points of references would be so far removed and different from ours that it wouldn't make a difference that the words were similar. Do you know what I mean? So,
Right,
if
right.
you remove that, so it's no longer just an animal on the same planet as you is something else from somewhere else with entirely different references, then
Right.
you don't know what you're looking at, do you? So I
Right.
suppose that makes perfect sense what
And
you're
it's
thinking.
and it's and it may be trying to sort of adapt to or to provide you a frame of reference, so it's utilizing other things, yeah.
Sure.
I get what you're saying. I would say, as far as the whimsy and the sense of humor goes, the best example of that, well, for me personally, would be the juice. But otherwise, amongst the mythos of the paranormal world, if there's one thing that you look up after this, if anyone does, I would ask you to look up Sam the Sandown Clown. And it
Sam
was
the
in
Sandown.
southern England. It was Sandown, England. Um, and these children report this encounter with this clown-like being. Um, and it is a
Right.
fascinating story. It could be complete. Yes, there's some indication that their father may have sort of inspired them, or at least guided them on this story. But
Right.
it also rings true, a lot of it, as far as just the just the there's tiny details when you experience these things. I didn't even really go into this, but there's tiny details that sort of make up the broader painting. And only once you experience one of these events do you notice these tiny little things that you'll pick up on in other paranormal stories, and you can tell what's just written by some TV writer who's never experienced one of these things,
Right.
compared to someone actually sharing their
Well,
story.
this is all the sort of thing that I regret that we haven't got time to do. Why don't we?
Sure.
I'll call this, the such and such episode part one, and then with part
True.
two, whenever we can get together again, we can
Sure.
use that time to just explore. And I want to learn more about the phenomenon, how it feels, and I want to know about that sort of world in general, how far into it you went, the whole thing, and we can have some fun with it. If you know what I mean, we can allow ourselves to play around with the ideas. How does that sound?
Sure. No, absolutely. I appreciate you letting me talk. I know I had a lot to get out. And
Oh,
I
mate,
know I.
it's my pleasure, and I wish I could facilitate you more time. It's only
No,
because,
no, no. I know it's late for you. I know it's late. I know. Um,
but that's okay.
I
But
really do
we'll
appreciate
do
your
it.
time, though.
Oh man, listen, I've loved every minute of it. You're a great communicator. I think that as soon as I can pin you down for a second episode, we'll go for a part two, and we can have a bit more of a deep dive into these topics. But for now, I
Sure.
just want to say that it's. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to host your story, and I hope that once you see the edit, how it comes out, and I hope that you feel that we've done your story justice and we've taken good care of it.
I have no doubt you'll do a great job. And again, I appreciate your time. And yeah, no, I'm absolutely happy to be back on, and look forward to speaking with you again.
Sweet. All right, buddy. You take care of yourself, and thanks again. I really appreciate it.
All right, man. Cheers. Have a good one.